Thank you, Joe. And I say thank you on behalf of everyone here. Without your time, your commitment, your talents, and this kind of generous donation, the church would not be what it is. And our reflection today. Science is always brave, for to know is to know good. Doubt and danger quail before her eye. What the coward overlooks in his hurry, she calmly scrutinizes, breaking ground like a pioneer for the array of arts that follow in her train. Henry David Thoreau. And our next hymn, here comes my challenge. I took French, Spanish, and English in high school. But number 291, Die Gedanken sind frei, is actually in English, and it translates as,
The thoughts are free.
Our thoughts are free. That's it. Thank you. And it's in English, so please rise as you're able and join us in singing. Nice job, everybody. So now we've gotten to the good part. Our speaker this morning, Tom Begush, my husband. I've known him long enough that I didn't bother to ask him to write up a little biography for me. I figured I knew enough that I could share just a teeny bit. So some of the things you might not know about him: he wears a size 12 shoe, rather wide. He has a tattoo on his right shoulder of a sort of green lizard. You probably don't get to see it very often in church. And if you look very closely, and this will probably make him uncomfortable later, he has a teeny tiny freckle on the end of his nose. So those things seemed like important to share this morning for his introduction. And without further ado, he's coming up to share about science and religion.
Thank you. This isn't going to be exactly the same as my other two sermons. This is going to be a little different, but that's okay. We like different. We accept different. I had several thoughts for talks that I wanted to give, and none of them were quite enough to stand on their own, so I tried to weave them all together. So if it does seem a little disjointed, deal with it. Okay, Google. What is the meaning to life, the universe, and everything? No, that doesn't work at all.
What's 42?
Yeah.
Let's try that again. Sorry, technical difficulties. Okay, Google. What is the meaning to life, the universe, and everything?
According to Wikipedia, the number 42E's in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams, the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything, calculated by an enormous supercomputer over a period of 7.5 million years. Unfortunately, no one knows what the question is.
Okay, Google. What is the meaning of life?
According to Wikipedia, the meaning of life is in the philosophical and religious conceptions of existence, social ties, consciousness, and happiness, and borders on many other issues, such as symbolic meaning, ontology, value, purpose, ethics, good and evil, free will, the existence of one or multiple gods, conceptions of God, the soul.
You get the point. All right, let me turn this back off. Okay, there we go. So I'd also like to thank Judy Armstrong for a little help on the research doing this. And one of the themes that I'd like to point out as I speak today is the theme of duality, of polarity, of opposites, of one or the other versus the other. This, that, just opposite ends of the same thing. So, I've titled today's sermon, The Effects of Scientific Discovery on Religion and Worship, or Where Love and Hate Collide, Science and Religion, or Bridging the Metaphysical Divide, or The Salsa Philosophy. And I'd like to start by, since our theme this month is acceptance, and one of the things we talked about is acceptance versus action. And the point I just want to make to begin is, are those two things mutually exclusive? Do you have to make a choice, one or the other? Can you accept something and still take action to change it? I don't have an answer to that. Science. Noun. The intellectual and practical activity encompassing the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment. Religion. Also a noun. The belief in and worship of a supernatural entity or controlling power, especially a personal god or gods. Science. Religion. Science and religion. Science versus religion. For a long time, what I've wanted to do, I've wanted to talk about bringing the worlds of science and religion together. Okay, that's not entirely true. What I'd like to do is stand up here and rant for an hour about how everybody else is wrong, and I'm the only one who's really actually figured things out for what they truly are. But that won't win me any friends, nor will it help to encourage positive verbal discourse between what I feel are two deeply entrenched opponents. Even in these technologically amazing and informationally pervasive times, there is a great divide between the spheres of science and religion. Maybe especially because of these modern times. Unfortunately, that long-standing schism only seems to be getting worse, and it's not helping anyone. We've got to do something about that. The theme we're exploring this month is acceptance. So why can't everybody just accept my point of view and accept that I'm right? Of course, everybody else is saying exactly the same thing, which may just be the root of the problem. Today's sermon will cover several areas of interest, primarily the effects of scientific discovery on religion, past, present, and future, but not the effects of religion on science, because that would be an entirely different sermon. I will also attempt to knock down some of the walls dividing the two, but that is not the heart of what we're going to talk about. And also, how can we work to lessen the animosity between the proponents of each perspective? Now, this really wouldn't be a UU sermon unless I said something about how, yes, I'm lumping lots of different viewpoints together, and that's not necessarily representative of blah, blah, blah. Accept it. Technology is merely the application of scientific discovery. So science itself doesn't necessarily change the world, unless it's simply changing our own understanding of our world. Even then, it's us that changes, and not the world. We must put those scientific discoveries to good use, and we do that by creating and using technology. Technology itself isn't inherently good or evil. It's how we use it that matters. Nuclear power plants or nuclear bombs? Medicine or lethal injection? How has the gift of technology affected our lives, our belief systems, and ourselves? The fact that I'm talking to you today with a microphone, being recorded on camera for instant, on-demand, worldwide broadcast in an air-conditioned, enclosed structure that we all drove our dinosaur-powered horseless carriages to, is a testament to how technology has made religion more consumable. I guarantee that if we had to walk here, squat on rocks out in the sun, and strain to hear me croak, that none of us, including me, would bother to show up. There is no doubt the pace at which technology advances is mind-boggling. I study technology all day, almost every day, and I am always a step behind. Some people might argue that religion is an ever-receding pocket of scientific ignorance. Others obviously disagree. But as our world continues to evolve, religion must adapt. Try as it might, religion cannot hold back the tide of knowledge that continually springs forth. It must compensate for the new discoveries or risk becoming increasingly irrelevant. And that applies to us also. How does any particular system of belief begin to make an attempt at remaining relevant, at reaching the masses and growing the population? By spreading the word, of course. Even the humble bicycle has allowed Mormons to increase the speed and efficiency of their proselytizing. All of my research and writing was done entirely on the internet. Thank you, Al Gore. They say there is more information in one newspaper than the average peasant had in a whole lifetime several hundred years ago. But I can't imagine writing more than one short paragraph without a keyboard. And before his infamous Bible, did you know that Gutenberg printed poetry? What Google can't tell me, though, and yes, there really is a Church of Google, is what were Gutenberg's motivations for choosing the Bible? Was he religious? Most people were. Or was it just a good decision for his business? Gesundheit. Gutenberg is perhaps the most famous, but he actually came late to the game. He was the first to print in the West. But the earliest known printed book is called the Jikji and is Korean. It is almost a century older than the Gutenberg Bible and is a treatise on Buddhism. And as long as we're talking about Deuteronomy, as long as we're talking about reading, Deuteronomy 23:1, let no man enter the temple of God who has a defect in his vision. Weird. Megachurches are a wonderful juxtaposition of technology and religion. Stadium-sized, computer-controlled lighting, movie theater-sized screens with surround sound, all while televising the action in the arena all over the world. One of my neighbors has a special satellite dish that pipes more than 200 Christian channels into his house in dozens of different languages. I fix it for him when the signal goes out. It took almost 30 years from the time it was first proposed until 1988 for the Shroud of Turin to be radiocarbon dated. 3 of the most esteemed and expensive laboratories around the world conducted the tests. All 3 laboratories dated it to about the year 1300 Anno Domini. But there is much debate about the entire thing. And I was going to take the stance that you'd have expected me to until I read that in 2008, the director of the Oxford Radiocarbon Accelerator Unit told the BBC that with the radiocarbon measurements and with all the other evidence that we have about the shroud, there does seem to be a conflict in the interpretation of the different evidence. So there's that. Moving on. Seriously, how do we even begin to try linking science and religion? How do we link the secular world with the divine? I don't know. But let's try something that everybody agrees on, like creation theory. The process of evolution, notice I didn't use the word theory, the process of evolution is always a fun topic. Most importantly, why must there be such polarity in origin of man ideas? Why must there be such polarity in anything, for that matter? This versus that, one or the other. Why not both or neither? I imagine generations of disheartened science teachers with a gag order, unable to tread near even the smallest modicum of religiosity, unable to help bridge that gap between blind acceptance, there's that word again, and enthusiastic understanding. I'll let you in on a little personal secret. I fantasize about being a science teacher. I do, really. I enjoy nothing more than, in simplest terms, transmitting information. And I sincerely believe that the best way to lastingly change the world is through education. It even says so on my resume, so it must be true. As much as I would love to forcibly cram a copy of Origin of the Species down the throats of the non-believers, it wouldn't work, and it would be a waste of a good book. And yes, I just called intelligent design defenders non-believers. So how do we gently reach across the aisle and encourage others to see it my way? I mean, see it differently. Surely that's what Jesus was talking about when he said, try fishing from the other side of the boat. See, us atheists can play the metaphor game too. Here is what I would say to the young, impressionable, fundamentalist disciple of creationism, if they were my student and I their science teacher. I would say that we as humans can only observe the natural world, and God is supernatural, above and beyond anything we can observe or comprehend. No man or woman can truly understand the pure nature of the divine. What we can do is study this natural world that was created by him in his image, a world that we were given dominion over, and to study and learn and care about the world that he gave us, that he made for us, is to try and get one tiny step closer to understanding the nature of God. It is an effort to bring us closer to him. There is plenty of evidence for evolution. Who's to say that evolution isn't another natural phenomena from on high, like the tides or the seasons? Who's to say that the Almighty didn't work it into his divine plan when he set things in motion? And yes, you're right, evolution is nowhere in the Bible, but the Bible doesn't talk about airplanes or video games either. And let's look at it this way. If God didn't want us to know about and learn about one of his designs, don't you think he'd easily hide it from our eyes? So you see, Timmy, evolution is not a malicious red herring sent from the great devil to lead us away from the holy. It's just another facet of one of the greater mysteries of the universe. I like to think that this line of reasoning could be applied to the scientific theory of the origin of the universe itself. When God snapped her fingers and created existence, why couldn't it have been done in some sort of enormous explosion? But we'll have to come up with a better name than that. Okay. Origin of the species, origin of the universe. How about the origin of individual people? And this is where it starts to get sticky. Artificial insemination. Of course, the Bible doesn't say anything about that either, unless, of course, we're talking about the most famous artificial insemination of them all. Proof that abstinence is only 99% effective. Thank you for laughing. Religious scholars today must try and interpret scriptural law to encompass difficult subjects like test tube babies? Does it matter if the sperm and egg are from people who aren't married? Is it a violation of the biblical laws on adultery if a third-party donor is involved? And what would that mean for the virgin birth? Are the man and his hand really committing the sin of Onan if it is for the express purpose of making little Christians, and his seed never actually touches the ground? This touchy subject is only going to get more and more complicated as medical technology continues to advance. With gene therapy and other technologies, it is already possible that a zygote can be produced from 3 separate people. What happens when a woman goes to a fertility clinic and just wants a clone of herself? This clone would have its own legal identity for tax purposes, of course. But what about its own soul? I mean, it's exactly the same as the original, right? What would the various religions say about a baby created of 2 men or 2 women? Maybe this is straying from the religion topic a bit, but the motivations are certainly connected. And since we're spending so much time focusing on reproduction, the abortion laws in our country have historically remained closely related to the point at which a fetus becomes medically viable. So as medical technology advances, babies who are born prematurely are able to be saved at an earlier stage of development. As such, the number of weeks between conception and when an abortion may legally be performed is constantly receding. What happens when a fetus can artificially be carried to term without the benefit of a human womb? Meaning, what happens when an infant can be produced entirely in a medical facility? What happens to that fetus when a parent wants to abort? It's no longer only the woman's decision. For premature babies, is artificial incubation interfering directly with God's will? My argument against that is, who the hell are you to decide God's will? And secondly, getting back to that whole divine plan, if God didn't approve of neonatal ICUs, they wouldn't exist. Therefore, if it exists, God must approve. Now imagine all the things we could apply that logic to. Medical technology has given us so many wonderful gifts. One of those gifts is organ donation. And for some, that's a religious decision. And for others, it's quite an easy decision. One of the popular things that we hear about in the world of technology is self-driving cars. And self-driving cars have driven more than 1 million miles in California, and they've never had an accident. So, one of the ideas is that with the advent of self-driving cars becoming more and more popular, organ donation is going to be on the decrease. I just wanted to point that out. Now consider all the life after death visions, the temporarily dead and then resurrected, and the near-death experiences that happens in ERs all across the country. I think your opinion of these events would very closely be related to your worldview. And since we're talking about birth, and since we're talking about death, it maybe seems like somehow I could tie that into birthdays and death days and then come up with some sort of really smooth segue into our next topic. Astrology. Which consists of a system of divination based on the idea that there is a relationship between astronomical phenomena and events in the human world. But here's my question. What happened as each new planet was discovered? How about when Pluto was a planet, then wasn't again, and isn't, and maybe will be again someday? Did all the predictions have to be recalculated? Did tarot cards have to get reprinted? It is estimated that there are hundreds to thousands of dwarf planets in the solar system, although there are currently only 5 that are recognized: Ceres, Pluto, Haumea, Makemake, and Eris. There are asteroids larger than the dwarf planets, and Jupiter has a moon larger than Mercury. Reading up on how to define an astronomical body is almost as confusing as reading up on making astrological predictions. I'll leave it at that. The simple telescope changed our entire view of the universe, in every sense of the phrase. Copernicus hypothesized, and Galileo challenged the viewpoint of Western civilization. The Catholic Church did not take kindly to the idea that the universe was not the center of the Earth was not the center of the universe. It was only when it became a publicity nightmare for the Church did they declare that God works in mysterious ways, which is almost exactly the antithesis to my earlier statement, if it exists, God must approve. And speaking of mysterious ways, Muslims pray 5 times a day, always facing toward the holy city of Mecca. What direction do Muslim astronauts pray? With the sunset and sunrise occurring on the International Space Station every 90 minutes, when should they fast for Ramadan? With water at an absolute premium in space, how should they ritually wash themselves? These are important questions that have been asked, as we have had 3 Muslim astronauts. I like to hope that we humans will not destroy ourselves long enough to colonize other planets. Something about not having all your eggs in one basket. What about all the other cultures who follow a lunar calendar? What happens if you're a Hindu living on Mars? Mars has 2 moons. Or a planet with no moons. When do you celebrate the Chinese New Year if one Martian year is 687 Earth days long? Would religious holidays on multiple planets have to coincide? I mean, it sounds kind of silly, and this may be a little far-fetched, but I like to hope that one day we'll actually have to debate these issues. What happens when, not if, we discover extraterrestrial life, intelligent or not? Will our collective feelings be hurt that we aren't God's only hobby? Or will we be grateful that we aren't totally alone? Father Jose Funes, a Jesuit astronomer and current director of the Vatican Observatory, who knew the Vatican had an observatory, suggested that the possibility of brother extraterrestrials poses no problem for Catholic theology, as a multiplicity of creatures exist on Earth, so there could be other beings, also intelligent, created by God. This does not conflict with our faith, because we cannot put limits on the creative freedom of God. I like that idea. Jesus came once and for all. The incarnation is a single and unique event. So I'm sure that they, in some way, would also have a chance to enjoy God's mercy. However, others, not so much. Creation Museum founder Ken Ham is calling for an end to the search for extraterrestrial life because aliens probably don't exist, and if they do, they're going to hell anyway. Apparently, this is a question that has troubled thinkers for centuries. 250 years ago, when Thomas Paine studied the astronomical research of the preceding 3 centuries, he somehow concluded that the existence of other planets revolving around other suns supported theism, but yet drastically altered the concept of God. From whence, then, could arise the solitary and strange conceit that the Almighty, who had millions of worlds equally dependent on his protection, should quit the care of all the rest, and come die in our world, because they say 1 man and 1 woman had eaten an apple? And, on the other hand, are we to suppose that every world in the boundless creation had an Eve, an apple, a serpent, and a Redeemer? In this case, the person who is irreverently called the Son of God, and sometimes God himself, would have nothing else to do than to travel from world to world in an endless succession of deaths. Once probably would have been enough, but I'm still dying to know when. Once, 1 death probably would have been enough, but I'm still dying to know, and this is something Google has been unable to tell me, is when the idea of an extrasolar planet, a planet outside of our solar system, was first hypothesized. Judaism and Islam do not have the problem of the incarnation, but they do subscribe, at least traditionally, to the very special place of human beings on this particular planet, and thus might be disoriented by the discovery of alien life. However, many Eastern religions, by not claiming a personal God, would not be so troubled. Now, I have 3 things left that I'd like to share with you. And the first 2 are philosophies, very similar to our own philosophy that we have over here on the wall. I'm going to read them, and then I'm going to tell you where they're from. The first. One should strive to act with compassion and empathy towards all creatures in accordance with reason. The struggle for justice is an ongoing and necessary pursuit that should prevail over laws and institutions. One's own body is inviolable, subject to one's own will alone. The freedoms of others should be respected, including the freedom to offend. To willfully and unjustly encroach upon the freedoms of another is to forego your own. Beliefs should conform to our best scientific understanding of the world. We should take care never to distort scientific facts to fit our beliefs. People are fallible. If we make a mistake, we should do our best to rectify it and resolve any harm that may have been caused. Every tenet is a guiding principle designed to inspire nobility in action and thought. The spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always prevail over the written or spoken word. And that is from the Church of Satan. Reject the notion that there is an inherent conflict between science and religion. Instead, believe science and religion are 2 systems of knowledge, each operating within its own sphere. They are fundamentally in harmony, mutually reinforcing, and both necessary to advance civilization. Religion without science soon degenerates into superstition and fanaticism, while science without religion becomes merely the instrument of crude materialism. Science and religion both describe reality, and reality is one. It is not possible for something to be scientifically false and religiously true. Contradictions are attributed to human fallibility. Science trains our minds to discover hidden realities. Religion helps us uncover the meaning and proper uses of scientific discovery. It is only by recognizing the harmonious and complementary nature of science and religion, then, that human society can safely move forward. And that is from the Baha'i religion. And lastly, bringing it back to acceptance. I make a really good salsa. I've made some today, and I encourage you to try it. And for years, I've perfected my salsa recipe, measuring and making batches and trying and taking notes. And here's how I make a really good salsa. You start with about 5 pounds of tomatoes, a couple of Anaheim peppers, a jalapeno or 2, 1 bunch of fresh cilantro. The dried stuff will do in a pinch, but the fresh is so much better. A bunch of green onions, a tablespoon of salt, and about a 1/3 cup of lime juice. And now you know my secret. And for years, I wanted it to be exact and get the same salsa every single time. But I cannot control how spicy a pepper is. I cannot control how juicy a tomato is. And all of these natural variables go in to my salsa. I can't control whether the grocery store has all the ingredients or if I have to substitute something. These are beyond my capability of influence. And the point I'm trying to make is, every time my salsa is going to be different. It will be different no matter what I do, no matter how hard I try. And I can let that ruin my day. And I can let that ruin my salsa. Or I can just accept it. I can just enjoy the salsa. Thank you.
Okay. We've made it all the way to the closing hymn, which is number 118, This Little Light of Mine. Please stand as you are willing and able and join us. You guys are really good at that one. So we've gotten to the point where we're getting to the end. I'm going to extinguish the chalice, and as I do, please join me in reciting our mission statement as a demonstration of our fellowship, our support of one another, and our commitment to the wider community. You will find it in our order of service. We agree to provide a safe space
to celebrate diversity, draw inspiration for living better lives, foster social and environmental justice, and compassionately support each other in our spiritual searches.
I have many thanks to share. First to our musician, Joe Cleland, who always does a wonderful job. To our friend Nick Reachmack, who did our chalice lighting today, and to our greeters, Fanny and Dylan Foster, who show up so regularly, and to all those others who helped put everything together today, whether it be in this building or the other building. As a group, we do an excellent job of just pulling it all together and making it all happen. And finally, I have some closing words. And some of them I'm going to have trouble pronouncing, and some of them you may have never heard before, but we'll do our best together. The man of science has one view of nature, and it is a correct one. It is a galvanic battery, an alembic, a gasometer, an orrery. But sure, this does not comprehend the whole idea of the universe, or exhaust the intention of the Creator. The poet has another view of the universe, and it is equally correct to that of the philosopher. To him, or her, it is a revelation of every varying and inexhaustible symbols. The poet's view is right. The philosopher's view is right. Yet, neither comprehends the whole of nature, nor do they both. forgot to thank our speaker. Thank you, Tom.